here we go. Oh my gosh. I hope that you feel so relaxed and know a little bit more about energy healing from listening with Farrell. I think that that's so important because we really get turned off sometimes about different modalities and therapies because of religion. And I don't think we should. I don't think we should. I think it's our responsibility, like anything else, to really follow our hearts. Like some things don't speak to certain people. But it's also very important to know the whole story, to really look at that, to do your own research, to follow your own heart, because sometimes we get stopped by idioisms in our head, or because mom said to do it this way, or the church said to do it that way, or the doctor said to do it this way. And we don't listen to our hearts when it comes to healing and when it comes to our careers and how to do business. Well, if you know my history and who I am, I have my PhD in transpersonal psychology. And therapy is really important to me. One reason why I went into the therapeutic field at the level that I am is because I want to change the system. Part of me that blocks me is that I am not licensed. And one reason why I'm not licensed is because as I was going through that process, I found out that the university I went to is nationally accredited and not federally accredited. And so I have to fill out more paperwork basically and go through another route for alternative therapy. And then COVID hit and it just didn't happen. So that's where I'm at, because I also went to school later in life after my divorces and after things. And it took me 6 years to finish that journey. But I look at other licensed therapists and I see the value in the deep dives. And I go through all the certifications. I go through all of the stuff as a licensed therapist would, because eventually I want to live in a space, and it might be Florida. I have some questions for Saudi after this that I was thinking about last night. I was like, well, I can't ask her that online, but so you know, Saudi, I'm going to be picking your brain. Because as a licensed therapist, I think that we need to be a part of the change. And when I met Saudi, our next speaker, we were in a training for our own businesses, for our own leadership, for our own breakthrough. And she was really vulnerable. She was really real. But she also shared about how much she's done for her community in the field of therapy and psychotherapy and relationships and going out there and being a woman who takes risks and does things differently within, you know, but she's playing by the rules. She's playing by the awareness that I think, and I'm excited to learn more. But I started following her on Facebook. We started talking, and my respect for who she is as a human and how she owns her own stuff and how she runs her company and her business and her therapy practice is something I just hugely respect and continue to grow in respect for. And so I'm really excited to share you. So go ahead and hop on and say hello. Hello.
Oh, it says I can't, I'm unable.
It says you
to start
can't?
my video. Yeah.
Well, that's silly. Let me ask it to. Maybe I have to ask you to. Did that work? Yay! Technical glitch away. Technical glitch gone. Beautiful. So this beautiful woman here beside me, we haven't known each other that long. It's been since summer, really. She's a licensed mental health counselor and a qualified supervisor for registered mental health counselors, which I hadn't even read until this very, very second. So literally I was praying last night and God was like, you need to talk to Saudi about it. That's why I told you to talk to her. And I'm like, what? And I'm just reading it. So perfect. Yay, I'm taken care of. Now you guys can be taken care of. And 25 plus years of experience as a therapist. And that's what really stood out when we met. Like, you have such a wisdom, and the practice that you've built is so beautiful. And then you were sharing your story. And I'm going to let you share your story now, because I think it doesn't land unless it comes from you. Like, it just lands better when it comes from you. And so, how did you become a therapist? Like, what was your yes?
All right. Well, first of all, Alicia, I just want to say thank you for having me here on your
Yeah.
platform. It's an honor. I'm excited to be here. You're like such amazing energy. We connected really well last year in that program that we were in. I'm a little hoarse, so I'm glad that I didn't get her name, but the pranic healer, she was like doing some chakra work, and I was like, good, because this has to get fixed. All right, well,
Good, yay. See, it
hello
all
everyone.
works out for a reason. It's perfect.
Oh, hello everyone, Alicia's community. So my name is Sarai Nammur. I'm a licensed mental health counselor in Florida. I own a community mental health center. And I also have a private practice where I do trauma therapy. Now, I've been a therapist for 25 years, but right now I'm mostly focused with adult survivors of, childhood trauma. At my agency, we do a lot of work with foster kids and families and stuff like that. And I have a master's degree. As you know, I'm not a doctorate like Leisha, but I have a master's degree in psychology, and I have 3 of my own kids and other kids that pretty much grew up in my house. So that's all, that's basically an introduction into me and who I am. But I like to say, I wasn't always like this. My heart and why this is, I'm a lot like Leisha, there's a reason why we become therapists and do what we do. And so for me, it had to do with my own childhood trauma. I grew up in a home where the home, I mean, I say home, but I actually lived in 17 houses, 17 different houses by the time I was 16. And maybe 4 or 5 of those weren't even with my parents. So I always wanted to work with foster kids. I wanted to have a shelter for foster kids. So I
Wow.
really was driven to do that. And God gave it to me in a different way. Sometimes we ask for things, but it comes in a different way. So through my agency, we pretty much got a contract to work with foster kids in Dade County in Florida. So that's basically what we've been doing at my agency for I would say the last 7, 8 years. We've been working with foster kids and getting them reunified, or not reunified with their family. But that's really important to me because I even though I was never a foster kid, I understand what it's like to go from home to home. And it wasn't always like that either. There was a time period, a year or so, that where I did go from home to home with all my stuff in a garbage bag. And so every
Wow.
time, that's why they always say, if you're going to give a gift to a foster kid, give them a suitcase so they can hold their stuff. Because you
Yeah.
will lose your stuff when it's in a bag, from home, from home to home. And there was in my house,
Oh my gosh. Okay,
go ahead.
I have to write that down. No, I'm just aha for me. I literally was just looking at all these suitcases because
Oh, you
we're
see?
moving, and I was looking at them, and I was just like, you know what? They're kind of old, but they're still good. Like, what can I do with all of these? I'm
Yeah.
friggin' gonna take them down to Denali Family Services. Like, this is just friggin' perfect.
Yes, you
Thank
see,
you.
maybe you needed to hear that.
I did. I did.
Uh, well,
Keep going.
another topic that's really dear to my heart too is domestic violence, because in my home there was a lot of domestic violence, and maybe not the typical type of what we think of domestic violence as man beating up a woman. It wasn't like that. It was my father coming home very angry. Every day there was a rage. And as a child, you're 5, 6, 7, and you see this huge man, and it looks like a monster coming home every night. And then I didn't receive a lot of the physical abuse, but my brother did. And so I spent a lot of years trying to save my brother, or wanting to, but never, of course, being able to. He was only a year younger than I was. And then with time, he ended up being my abuser. He ended up, as he got older, he just pretty much took it all on me. And eventually, Starting at like 14 years old, he started going to jail. And then every time he go to jail, he'll come back a little stronger and a little bit more aggressive. And he was the, in, in prison, there's like the house man. He wanted to run the house, like he was the house man. And we all had to do whatever he said. And eventually I ended up deciding that I had to leave. I decided that it took a while, at 21 was when I finally decided to leave, but it took a big incident to occur where it was life and death. It was pretty much, someone's gonna end up dead here. And my mom didn't really protect me. I didn't have any protection in the house. She was too busy protecting him. And what that teaches us is to protect the perpetrator. So there's a lot of homes where and then we wonder why as adult women we feel sorry for the perpetrator, or we over empathize with their trauma, and that's the reason why we stay. But it's, we learned this a long time ago. So I did learn that, and then it took me 1,000 years to unlearn it. It took me forever to unlearn, to stop, where you over consider the perpetrator and there's no consideration left for yourself. So in a nutshell, that's, that there's a lot of stories I could tell, but we'll be here for days. But I like to talk a lot about complex PTSD because I'm a survivor of complex PTSD. And it's been a long journey to heal from that. And it's really we never land on the land of healing. That's one thing I teach is there's no such thing as I'm healed. I don't like to teach people that, because then the minute you're triggered 5 years later, you're like,
then
why
you're
did
in
I get
guilt and
triggered? I
shame.
must have done
Right.
it wrong.
I was never supposed to get triggered again. It's like, no, it's okay. Now you know how to do the trigger. It's okay.
Exactly.
So one reason why I wanted to have you on specifically is because of my own passion, right? Because we do similar work, and PTSD and childhood trauma and all this stuff, and there is so much self-abandonment. So you just brought it up, which is perfect. There's so much self-abandonment, and I think we need to talk about it more. I think we need to have more voices just talking about how, whether it's business, you're going into business, and whether you're going into to heal yourself, right? There's the self-abandonment or not following your heart, and how you labeled your talk, which I friggin' loved because we didn't really even talk about it, but you're like 3 reasons why healing the abandonment wound sets you up for success. And I was like, and that's it. I think PTSD personally is, for me, for all of my clients, like, this is my take. I think PTSD is a way for your body, your system to say, I'm not abandoning you. I'm not abandoning you. It reminds you that it was still there. It reminds you that you were there. It's a flashback. It did abandon you in the moment. You abandoned you in the moment. Your consciousness abandoned you in that moment. And it comes back, and we call it PTSD, to go, but I'm not abandoning you now. And if it happens again, here's how we can do it. And right? And then we shove that down, we shove it away. And I personally think that most people have PTSD. Maybe not CPTSD, but most people have PTSD. And so why don't you explain PTSD, why don't we start there, and abandonment?
Okay.
If you don't mind, can I just guide? You can guide too.
The way that I run my agency, is that we're a trauma-informed agency, and we make sure that everything we do is through the trauma lens. So one thing that's interesting is that if providers are not trauma informed, we really do such a disservice to people. And I see that often when we get a client from the hospital where we get their records and it says ADHD, generalized anxiety disorder, bipolar disorder, depression, anxiety, like they list so much stuff. And the minute I look at them, like, oh, they have CPTSD. Let me talk to them. Because that's in a nutshell, that's what CPTSD is. All of that. It's all of that. And it's basically who we needed to become to survive. Like what you were saying, it's so interesting how you put it, that you said we don't abandon. That's us showing that we're there for ourselves. And in that way, we end up acquiring a lot of trauma response habits that they help us in the moment. Some of that could even be substance abuse. It could be the real ugly stuff.
Mm-hmm.
It could be cutting. It could be so many different things that I call it the ugly stuff, but that ugly stuff helped us survive that situation. And then it just doesn't help us now as adults. So in your platform, I know you have a lot of people who are who are they want to do a business, a healing business, and that sort of stuff. And it's so important to understand that a lot of the way people show up it's just their survival uh personality, their survival person, but that's not
Yep.
all that who we are. So you ask, like, what's PTSD? PTSD is different from CPTSD because PTSD is a one-time thing that could happen to us where we develop this reaction, like what you were saying. um what did you say earlier? The flashbacks, the anxiety, the overwhelming emotions. You could have nightmares. You just become dysregulated for a time period, but with help, you could overcome that. Complex PTSD, it's a little different because that means that we were exposed nonstop to a very stressful event as children. So it interfered with our entire development, our
Mm-hmm.
brain development, or even our physical. I mean, we could even see kids with physical issues because their physical development was stunted. Maybe they weren't even fed correctly. Maybe they were neglected to that level. So it's
Mm-hmm.
so many different ways, so many different traumas happening at once, consistently, nonstop for years. So like
Yeah.
someone was talking about fight or flight. So you're constantly on fight or flight. And then we get the adult who is hypervigilant and anxious, and you're wondering why they're like that and why are they taking this drug and that drug, and they're trying to survive. So
Yeah.
once you understand that, you have a level of compassion for people and the things that they do to survive, even if it's the ugly stuff. And if you could view the person from that point of view, then you could actually help them. Because with
Mm-hmm.
judgment, we can't help people. If we're judging who they became to survive, and it's that person who's in front of us, as ugly as it is and as ugly as it looks, we have to find a way. It's our responsibility to find a way to understand how they became that person, and even get to the point where you say, wow, I get it. I get how you became that. And I could see how I could become that too if I would have been through what you went through. Once you're able
Yeah.
to say that, the door opens for us to help people start their healing journey.
And
Their
I
journey.
want to just point out what she just said, you guys, because this is super important, because this is going to save you. I want to save you from bad relationships. I think that we could both, like, we're going to, you'll be like, yeah, that. So she said, then you can help them on their healing journey. So she's talking about being understanding and compassionate about where somebody is coming from when they come to you for healing and help. This is being trauma informed, which is another thing that you said that's so important in everything. We actually bonded in the course. I dropped out of it, but we bonded in the course because it was not trauma informed,
Yeah.
where we met. And it's so important. But when you do this in a relationship, it's called codependency because they're not asking for help. Okay, so when you're taking bad behavior, every bad behavior, whether it's drugs, hypervigilance, codependence, yelling, screaming, rage fits, flashback, I mean, all the stuff that comes with being a kid coping and stuck in the CPTSD pattern or fight, flight, and freeze pattern, and whatever you did to cope with it. As a healer, as a practitioner, it's important to be trauma informed, and it's important to be accepting and understanding of how somebody gets to that point, right? And why they came up with that. As a partner, you don't have to deal with that. As a friend, you don't have to deal with that. And by not dealing with that, you're actually going, well, it's time for you to go get help if you want people to deal with that. Because we all need to be good people, and we all can be good people. We all can heal from our past, at least to the place, I believe, of understanding who we are so we can be our best versions and not be on drugs and not be flipping out all the time and know how to regulate our systems. Would you agree? I
Yeah,
don't
I'm so
want
glad
somebody
you
to hear
clarified.
this and be like, oh, well, she told me to be understanding of
Right.
why he's screaming at me. So I'm going to let my brother, uncle, sister, mom beat the crap out of me and call me names because they were called names as a child, right?
That's so
It's
I'm
not
so
that.
glad I'm so glad you clarified. I was speaking to people who are doing it as a profession, but I'm so glad you clarified.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to point that
It's
out. Like
not our
if you're
profession
listening,
to fix our
if you're
partners.
listening, it's very important that we distinct this because we learned the hard way, right, Buddy? Like
Yes,
we learned the hard
that's
way.
so good. So, and you know what? As a recovering codependent, I will tell you, like it was my job to fix the people around me, and it all I
Mhm.
know it all came from me not being able to save my brother and having that guilt,
Yep.
actually, and he passed away. He and from even from
Mhm.
as a result of the mental health and substance abuse issues that came from everything we went through. But for me, it was my profession, not just my profession over here, but my profession at home and everywhere to be the
Yeah.
fixer. So I'm so glad you clarified that. And to add to that, I want to say, when we take on that role, what we're actually doing is stunting the other person's ability to heal or their chances to heal or grow themselves because we're taking responsibility for them while at the same time not even taking responsibility for ourselves. Because when we're too
Yeah.
busy over there, we're not taking care of ourselves either. So I'm glad you
And that
clarified.
brings us back to the abandonment piece. Yeah.
Exactly,
So what
exactly.
are the three reasons why healing that abandonment wound and what does that wound kind of look like? We're talking about it a little bit, but you can get a little bit more specific so we can recognize it. And then, yeah, I'd love to know the steps.
Okay, so first to clarify, I wanna talk like what you mentioned that you feel like just about everyone has some PTSD, when we have what we have, then we can see it in everyone else. While
Yeah.
they're calling it anxiety or like, we're like, no, I see a little bit more than that. I see shame, I see guilt, I see a bunch of other stuff. So I agree with you, but what I really, a point that I want people to know is maybe you weren't physically abandoned because I did describe where I was physically abandoned because I lived in homes not even with my parents, and there was a time period like that. So I was physically abandoned. I was neglected. So that's one thing, but there was so much more that added to my own abandonment that I want to tell the viewers is, what it doesn't matter what type of trauma you go through, there's a component of abandonment. If it's sexual abuse, physical abuse, emotional, psychological, whatever type of abuse, I find personally and in my profession, I find that everyone, doesn't matter what their abuse is or what they went through, everyone walks in with the abandonment wound to the point where now that's the main thing that I focus on healing is the abandonment wound. Because think about it, for if you're a child and your caretaker or someone who you trust is abusing you in some way, they are literally abandoning your wants, your needs, your desires, everything in order to do what they're doing. So
Mm-hmm.
you are literally abandoned as a spirit being, as a human being and a spirit being. You are being abandoned because they are using you to do whatever it is they want, or they don't have the emotional maturity to treat you as a honor, like someone of honor, someone that should be cherished and honored. So when that happens, we learn to abandon ourselves. And that's
Mm-hmm.
where the and we have to abandon ourselves, by the way. So it isn't that it is it's learned, but also we have to serve in order to survive, we have to disconnect from what we really want. We have to disconnect from our values, from our beliefs, from everything else, or else it would be way too painful. It's already painful, but it's way too painful if every day we thought about what it should be like, or we thought about what we want, or we even expressed it. Sometimes it's even dangerous in these
Dangerous to
rooms to
express it.
express
Yep.
what you want or stand up for yourself
Yep.
because something bad could happen to you. So you literally have to disconnect. And imagine a child that goes through this from birth till 15, 16, 17, they run away from all those years. What happens, that's why it's a trauma response habit, is because then we get into the habit of completely disconnecting from ourselves in order to survive that situation. We just never come back to ourselves.
Yep.
So to heal to heal our wound, that's I'm going to flow into like what are the three steps that I take everyone on. So the first thing we need to do is awareness, and that's where I equate healing with awareness. Why? Because the opposite of awareness is denial, resistance, dissociation. This is all the complete opposite of awareness. So in order to heal, we need to get to a place of awareness and loving awareness. It's so important to be with someone that isn't judging you. And that's why I mentioned being trauma informed, and to really first, before you even do anything, I need to know, I need to be in your world. I need to see through your eyes. I need to hear what you heard. I need to feel what you felt. So I'm not just getting it here, but my soul is getting it. I'm like, oh, I get it. I need to get it. And once I get it, now together we're going to become aware of all the things that you don't even want to be aware of. And right, create a space where now it's safe to go back there and do that work. So step one, or the most important thing, a reason to do this is because you need to heal. You deserve healing. We all deserve to be healed. We all deserve to be authentic, and we can't be authentic when we're self-abandoning. So that's number one, is healing. And like I said before, healing isn't, a one and done thing. It's actually just saying yes to the healing journey. It's saying yes to living with your eyes wide open. It's saying yes to feeling your triggers. It's saying yes to remembering. It's saying yes to all those things, so that now you can have power and control over it, because back then we didn't have power and control. So we had to push it aside. That's the only way we could survive. It's about dealing with your wounded inner child, because if you think your wounded inner child isn't here, and you haven't done your healing journey, that's who's showing up every day, especially in your trigger moments. It isn't the adult you, it's the inner
No.
child you who's acting
Yeah.
out in your,
Absolutely.
and he or she is showing up in your adult life, and people are looking at you like, why are they doing that? And
Yeah.
it's because it's not even your adult self, it's your inner child. And if I had to say, like, in a nutshell, what healing is, to me, healing is becoming emotionally mature. And we don't become emotionally mature if we don't do our healing. We can't deal with things in an emotionally mature way. We can't even have conversations that are triggering without, acting like a child. So it's really about that. The next thing is, once you do the healing, then the next step is to start your transformation. And transformation isn't the same as change. Transformation means that now you have a chance to transform into your true identity, the person you don't even know who you could be, but it's where all your possibilities and your potential exist. And it takes a lot of courage. It takes a lot of courage to start dreaming, and to start remembering, like, who you could be, to start remembering, creating memories of the future. And we have the power to create memories of the future. We have the power to sit and visualize and dream of what it could be like. And as we do that, we start creating memories of the future being that we could be, that exists. That person exists. It's on the timeline, it exists. And the more you spend, because what do we mostly use our if we're not healed, we're using our imagination to remember the past.
The past.
And
Yep.
then the more we remember the past, the more we're living in that identity. So transformation means creating who you want to be, because we get to do that. Like, we get to decide who. We didn't get to decide that back there. I mean, we did get to decide how we're going to react and respond, but now we get to.
And not if you're 3 or 2 or 1, right?
Yeah, you don't even get,
Like, no,
exactly.
it depends how early it started. Like,
But
and my
now,
4-year-old, she saved me for years.
wow.
I remember, so this is something, I don't know, like, you brought it up though, so I was like, this is so important to know. If you're on the healing journey, or working with people that are on this healing journey, that was just amazing. I was about 33 and I stopped eating gluten, and gluten for me did a number of doozies, but one thing is, it was like a fog of confusion in front of my face. Now I go into anaphylactic shock, but before I had like this tolerance, and it was just like crazy making. And that lifted up, and then all the previous work I had done, like psychologically, kind of started lining up. That I remember literally watching myself go, oh, well, now I'm acting like my 4-year-old self the first time that happened, and now I'm acting like my 12-year-old self, and now I'm acting like my 16-year-old self, and then I was like acting like a 21-year-old, right? And then all of a sudden I was my age. and I could start reacting to everything with my age. But I literally had to walk through like my major traumas,
Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
And in maturity, and I would watch myself, but I was reacting even from that infant space where I was like biting my toenails in a restaurant. I was reacting from that space because that infant got through that trauma because my trauma started so young. And
Mm.
and as I healed, if I once I did your acceptance, like you said, and I was healing up through those stages, I watched myself very consciously, like, oh well, that's how I would have acted if I was 16. Yep. Okay. Well, thank you so much, 16-year-old me, and kind of know better now. That was really embarrassing, right? And oh, we don't have to go drinking and partying and avoiding. Like, well, let's do some journaling. Let's like, can I get the 24-year-old on tap here, right? Like, and started maturing until I think it kind of all integrated. I was about 37, 36 was before my divorce, so 37, 36 when it all integrated, and I had some of my first major triggers where I reacted as a mature adult, and I was shocked,
Yeah, that's true.
right? I was like,
The first time you're
whoa, what just happened? And that's what I call healing, right? It's
right.
not that I don't get triggered, but I can react from a place of adulthood shaking and in my anxiety and stuff, but still from a place of, well, I'm 48, right? I'm age appropriate. And my little inner children no longer are on like high alert going, I'm ready to come and save you. We've been through this, right?
It's
So not
and
self-abandoning.
when you finally show up as an adult, you're like, who is that? How did that happen?
Where did they come
Like,
from?
and I love, that it's so important for us to show up and talk about this without the shame, without, that guilt and shame, which, I finally have released, because we give so many people permission to be, I'm 54 years old, and I'm going to tell you guys, I probably just did way better over the last 4 or 5 years. So, so
Yeah.
I finally grew up more like 49, 50, because a lot of my, 16, like you said, 16 at 20, all my 20s showed up. And, it
And they
wasn't
could
very
manage
mature.
better. They could manage better. They had that fight in them. Like I was happy to be 16 and not 4,
Yeah.
right? But man, she hung on for a while. I was like, this is really getting destructive. Like I gotta stop.
Exactly. Exactly.
Okay, go
Exactly.
on. So that's step one. I just wanted to share that because it's so beautiful. Step two, review really quickly.
Step two is
Transformation.
is is where you start the transformation, because now you've learned some stuff through your healing, you're more aware, and so now you start the transformation and you start creating that vision of who you want to be. And I think visualization is so important, because through visualization we start creating memories of our future self. I do it on purpose. On purpose, I create this person who I want to be and where I want to be. And as I started doing that, it started happening in my life. Like, I would imagine a place, and next thing you know, I'm in California in Big Sur, which is amazing. Like, that place is the most beautiful place I've ever seen in my life. So I started creating visions of things that just my brain created it, and next thing it shows up in real life.
Yeah.
And it shows up not by magic, it shows up because we start being drawn to it and we're open to it and stuff like that. So it's so important to do visualization and just create new memories of the future self, so that you can start getting pulled in that direction. And so that's super important. So that's, and then also when you start doing that, when you start creating the future self, then you start noticing, okay, that future self is over there, I'm here. Sometimes it isn't just about creating, for me, it was a lot about beaches and vacations, right? So that's what I created. So, but it could be, I see myself as a therapist, and maybe I'm not a therapist, let's say. So then you start, now I could create a plan. What skills do I need to develop? Or maybe you see yourself in a future relationship with someone. Okay, now that I know what I want and I see that vision of that, okay, now let me make a list of what I actually want. Let me become aware of that. What is it that I want? Because my picker at 20 was like, are you cute? Okay, you're good. So that's
Thank
when
you.
you're not doing that anymore. Now it's like, okay, I want this, this, this. So it creates a space through transformation. You start creating a space of you, because not only are you aware of the stuff that you have to be aware of at healing, but you have to be aware of stuff to transform, because you need to figure out, okay, what skills do I need to develop? In what areas do I need to get better so my full potential could be realized? And of course, we never reach our full potential, because we would have to die and come back I don't know how many times and continue to evolve and evolve and evolve. But in this journey, in this lifetime, like, what do I need to do on my part so I could fully evolve into whatever I can during the time I'm here? And then the last step is what I call thriving, is just pretty much thriving, which is where it all becomes really integrated, and you start taking massive and radical actions towards what you want. Because I could visualize all day, I could create a plan all day, but if I'm not taking the actions that are necessary, or if I keep putting it off for next year and the next year and the next year, then 5 years go by and you have a lot of knowledge, but nothing's getting done. And we know, we've all been there. We've all been there where we've taken 50 classes and we still don't do the thing.
Yep.
So it's about, like, so the last step is taking courageous action and just showing up, putting it on the calendar and going. I say putting it on the calendar because if I don't put it on the calendar, it doesn't get done. So I have to put it on
And
the calendar.
I've loved watching because I remember in the group, and I'm not naming the group, you guys, on purpose, because it is something I dropped out of because it was not trauma informed and very trauma invoking, and I wasn't traumatized. I was rolling through it. I stuck with it, I guess, but
I didn't tell you, but I didn't continue either.
you didn't either. So, but I was just so against everything that I ever would recommend, and they wanted us to recommend it, and I couldn't ethically. I couldn't, and Saudi couldn't either. But so that's why I'm not naming it. The person that sold me into it, I like, and I still follow her work. And actually, she kind of inspired me to do summits again, right? It's like you pick and you choose which ones to follow. But I lost track of what I was going to say. Oh. So you said in there, you're like, I want to be the healthiest version of myself. Like she was stepping out of a relationship, not to, like, I'm not going to tell your story, but just this is an important piece. So she was stepping out of a relationship. She was up-leveling her business. She was doing all this stuff. I'm listening to what she's doing. And she's like, I'm claiming my health, right? And one thing that made me, when I was really looking at who do I want to be in here, right? And who would I want to be in here that's going to talk about the same thing that I do, right? That's a very precious spot. And there's not too many childhood trauma therapists out there. And I think this is some of the most important work in the universe. There's more of us and it's getting more recognized, but not too many I could just like pick from, right? And that really focus and have the empire. I mean, you have a friggin' empire. But what this woman did is she started posting you at the gym and you really claiming your health. And that was your main thing in the group. And it'll make me cry now because I was like, yes, even though she's so busy and she has her kids and she has her company and she has this, here's her walking her fucking talk and at the gym and lifting weights and saying yes to her and watching your body transform. And I remember you saying there, like, where you were in that journey and the amount of respect I have for your radical, like, I'm sure you're busy.
Yeah.
I mean, you have a whole trauma center, right? Like, I am sure you were one busy cookie, plus your own practice. Like, holy cow. And I know your kids, right? So anyway, I just want to give you props for that because she walks her talk. And it can be like that.
I didn't even notice it till you said it. Like,
really?
I didn't notice I did that until you just said it. And I'm like, wow, I did do that. Like,
Yeah.
because you know what? It really wasn't easy for me because the shame, with complex PTSD, a main symptom of it is shame. And I carried shame for so long, except for you would never know because my shame was like the majority of us who carry shame, we show up perfect. So I was like, you would think I have people who would tell me like, oh, you wouldn't understand because everything's perfect for you, because they don't know my story. So then people who are who struggle with perfectionism actually carry a lot of shame because that's why they're perfectionists. So it's funny that you say that because a lot of people have told me how much they're inspired by my videos at the gym. And I struggled at first with even showing those because I thought like, oh, like, that doesn't look right, or I'm a therapist, I shouldn't be showing my video, all this shame talk. The shame part of me was doing its
Yeah.
job. Oh, you shouldn't do that. What are people gonna think? And you're not like, do you think you look as good as everybody? You don't look like everyone else. And so that whole talk happened, and you just made me realize that I overcame that because I actually did start posting videos, and then I started getting like a lot of women, which I love that a lot of women were like, oh wow, you're inspiring me. I really want to do it. And I'm 50, I'm gonna be 55 in 4 months. So that's another big deal for me is I want to show women that are older, and I hate to say older because I don't feel older, but
Yeah.
women who are mature or over 40s, 50s, whatever age, it doesn't matter. You could do anything the minute you choose it. The minute you choose to transform, you could transform anything. That's what I truly believe. You could just choose and start doing it. Just fill the gap. Like, what do you need to do? Which is basically what I just finished talking about.
Yeah,
But thank you
exactly. I was
for
like,
the
this is
I really
perfect. Yeah, because it was definitely one thing. Like I said, like I don't do things unintentionally. And I do things full of faith, but not unintentionally. And so I really prayed, like, who do I ask to be in this? Who's going to be there? And then whoever fell, like, fell, right? I knew how many people and, like, whatever. And I accidentally got two more, but promise 12, give 14, right? That's how it always works. And I really respect that you did that. And I really respect that you keep walking in to your next level and doing what your heart calls. And yeah, I love that you just said that thing about perfectionism, because people would say, oh, you have to drop the perfectionism. I'm like, I'm not a perfectionist. Like, have you seen my mother's house? Like, I am not a perfectionist. Like that's my mom's thing, not me. I'm the opposite of perfection. Like, I'm the total not perfect. And oh my God, was I wrong? Like, I just wasn't looking at perfectionism from like the point of view that it was hitting me, because I was right here in it. And
Right.
once I finally got how it wasn't about everything looking perfect for me, it was about like, yeah, that shame, right? Oh,
Yeah.
have to show up, have to do it, have to be there for people, have to.
Right.
And even the perfectionism of wearing my victimism.
Yeah.
I did that really good. And I was a perfectionist because I could be vulnerable. Like, all these weird ways that it showed up. It's sneaky
Right.
perfectionism,
Right. Wow. I
survival
couldn't hide mine. There
perfectionism.
was no way of hiding mine because it was obvious. I did it the classical way.
Well, and school and school and school and school,
Right.
right?
Right.
Yeah.
That's so true.
Yeah,
That's so
yeah.
true.
Achievement was a big one for me. So how do people get in touch with you? Do you work with people just in Florida, or do you work with people around the world? How do you work? Um,
Well, in Miami, in Dade County, we were at my agency, we work with people in Dade County. Myself personally, I can't do out of state therapy. I could do out of state coaching, but not out of state therapy. So in Florida, I could do therapy. And for coaching, it could be anywhere. And what I do in coaching, it's really mostly like what I'm talking about here. It's really for people who are already successful, but maybe they're hitting some of those trauma blocks, which are the trauma response habits that we create, and maybe we're just not aware of them. And so that's what I do with coaching, is help remove those habits and create better habits so that you can reach your full potential, and just make your dreams come true and become the person that could do that too.
yeah, perfect. So how do they get in touch with you? Besides
I-
on the page, on the speaker page, you guys, her link is on the bottom there. You can just click and go.
So my name is it's the same, Sarai. I'm the only one in the whole United States. So Sarai Nammur, and that's I'm everywhere the same name. And I'm really working on my YouTube channel, so if you want to go see me over there, or my website is the same thing, www.sarainamour.com. And anywhere you can find me anywhere and just send me a message. And my email
Perfect.
is the same thing, sarai@sarainamour.com.
Perfect. So it's Sarai, if you're just listening, Nammur.com.
Yes.
Perfect. Perfect.
Thank
Thank
you
you
so
so
much for
much. We'll
having me.
open it up. Yeah. So we'll open up for any questions. If you're listening on YouTube, I have the chat open. If you want to comment, be the first to comment on YouTube. Come on, YouTube. And if you're inside here and you have anything you want to chat, and then we'll go to our private Zoom time here. So anything, we'll let that catch up. Oh, super fun. I love the 3 steps. I love the 3 steps. So awareness, transformation, and then action.
Yeah, it's I say heal, transform, and thrive.
Thrive. Yeah. Heal, transform, thrive. I love that.
Can't
I
thrive
love
without the
it.
action part, right?
You can't thrive without the action part. Yeah. So that was my biggest takeaway, I guess, from step 3 is like that's the action part. Hey, we
Yeah.
gotta be in the action, living as if, but not blind, to what's around. It's not pretend when you're remembering your history. You're planning for it. You're getting ready for it. I love that.
And then the good thing about like coaching is that when you're doing that component, it isn't like, oh, you're off doing it on your own, because that's actually one of the hardest parts, because when you're doing it on your own, that's when the trauma blocks start showing up.
Yep.
Oh, you can't do it. Oh, what do you think? Oh, a lot of, all of that. And that's where the procrastination shows up, self-sabotaging. And then next thing you know, a year went by, you didn't do what you said you were gonna do.
Yeah, exactly. And that keeps you stuck.
Yeah.
So perfect. Absolutely love it. So those of you who are listening, we are going to go onto our Zoom, and then we will have our next speaker, who is Denise, and I'm not going to say her last name because she changed it up on me years ago when she got married, a couple years ago, and it's really hard to pronounce, so I'm just going to let her do it. Her other last name is pretty hard to pronounce, honestly, too. But I've been friends with her for about 10 years. She came from an abusive relationship, a narcissistic relationship, and went through a pretty crazy divorce, became a coach, and now coaches women and supports them through that. So it's a beautiful story on the power of being a coach, what it feels like to be a coach. So you all know all of our certifications at Your Own University are trauma-informed. It's super, super important to me that we're trauma-informed, being from a trauma background. And in all honesty, I just want to say this with Sarai here, because I think a lot of coaching programs, not all of them are trauma-informed. More are trauma-informed, but not all of them are trauma-informed. And for me, the 2 that I went through before my master's and my doctorate and began being a therapist and working in the field and being trauma-informed in an educational way, they weren't. And just because I went through trauma, I thought that because I have compassion and understanding, I thought that I understood how to be trauma-informed, but I would trigger people and I'd do things, and I didn't know how to help and support around that until I went through, and I've gone through many trauma-informed trainings now, but until I went through my first couple trainings and realized how important being trauma-informed trained is. Just because you went through trauma does not mean you are trauma-informed. It actually can kind of backfire and be the opposite. That was my own personal experience, which threw me into my master's degree, in all honesty. I was like, I have to know how to work with the people I desire to work with. They take special love, right?
Yeah, just because you're trauma exposed doesn't mean you're trauma informed. That's what I tell people. You're trauma
Yeah,
exposed, but not trauma informed.
yeah.
So different.
Yeah, very different, very, very good. So when you have trauma and you're looking for a therapist, you're looking for a coach, make sure that they are trauma informed.